Alrighty, are we ready? I think we're ready. I've done my test recordings. I've got my volume sounded good. Let's talk about the draft. My favorite part of the season, the best part of the season. I would just throw away all the teams, do it all over if I could. I love the draft. It's the best part. Even when you're not happy with the draft, it's still fun. But I'm happy with the draft. Oh, also, I have new glasses and my hair's not 2 feet long anymore. It's all cut and it's short now. See? Now it's like regular person length instead of crazy. And then I'll just not get a haircut again for a year and a half, and then it'll be that long again. Alrighty. Let's get into this. Season 9. It's Reg C, second Gen 9 season. 115 point budget. I only used 114 of my points, so I got an extra point sitting in the bank to make transactions a little easier, which is really something I always say I need to pay more attention to and generally don't, but I think I want to probably this season. I don't know. I think my team's really good, so maybe I don't have to, but if I do, make more of an effort. All right, so we're going to start with just a little bit of what I think about planning before the draft. I don't think it's super worth it. I think the best time to start planning your draft is after pick 2. You get your whatever you can get that's great. Then you get something that goes with that thing that's great in round 2, and then you can start kind of building a draft around that. I'm not a huge draft planner in general, but I think that's a pretty kind of practical way to do it. So here's just a little proof of what happens when you start planning at the beginning of a draft. Oh, I'll take the Talonflame because Garchomp and Great Tusk don't both go, and Roaring Moon will probably get taken in the 6 in between my first and second pick. And then I'm like, yeah, great. Talonflame seems good. Seems very safe. And then 2 picks after my pick was Great Tusk. And then the very next pick was Garchomp. So Slushy and Big Bling Boy, I'm coming for you. Except I think maybe only want to use in my division. I don't care. Also, I'm not really coming for you. It's fine. My team turned out fine. I like my team. But again, it was a very reasonable plan. And yet, it was immediately thrown into the garbage because it's not worth planning ahead of time. So anyway, that's weird. Oh no, some of my pictures. Oh no. Oh, that's a big pain. Okay, well, we're going to cut here. I'm going to fix this, and then we're going to come back. It was easy to fix. I just had to reload Google Slides. It didn't take me very long. I don't know why those pictures didn't load, but they do now. So get excited, because I am. This is the squad. Who is who will become clear as we go through it. Let's start with my first pick. 16 points, 13th pick overall, Talonflame. As I mentioned, the original plan was get it with a strong ground type, preferably either Garchomp or Great Tusk, that really appreciates the speed support and that can throw out super strong earthquakes next to it. But Talonflame is also just like generally very good, right? I mean, people know why it's good. It's got a broken ability. It's really fast. It's got very high base damage stab moves. Its typing is pretty good. It's got a lot of good support moves, and fast Pokemon with support moves are good. Hawkman is great. And that's Talonflame's nickname, by the way. Talonflame will be Hawkman or Hawkman of Thanagar. I don't know how many character limits the Showdown nickname thing has, so maybe it'll just be Hawkman. But Talonflame is great. Take it in your next draft. But you can't have it in this one, because I got it. Second, we've got Etrigan the Demon. Gone the form of Garchomp. Rise the Demon Etrigan. It doesn't rhyme when you replace man with Garchomp, but that's okay. Etrigan the Demon, another DC sort of B-list kind of guy. Cool demon monster bound to a human. And also, Roaring Moon is a cool little monster. And it's great. 21 points, top of the board. It does everything. Its stats are broken. It has crazy good moves. Between Talonflame and Roaring Moon, they each can kind of take a little bit of the pressure off the other on like always having to be a Tailwinder, which is nice. Roaring Moon can tear it into ground and just throw Earthquakes out anyway for big damage stab Earthquakes. And it can also do all kinds of other crazy stuff, right? Roaring Moon is pretty great. It can also taunt. It can, Breaking Swipe and Snarl. It's eight Pokemon in one. It's great. Roaring Moon is great. I'm very happy to have got it. So after my first two picks, I'm like, okay, so now I gotta start coming up with some ideas. What do I want? What goes together very well with ground types? And a fairy weakness, 4 times fairy weakness, is a steel type. So we go with one of the OG steels, John Henry Irons, Steel, the Scizor. These next two picks I actually kind of planned at the same time. I was like, Scizor definitely goes before Florges. It's not a secret. The fourth pick is Florges. So I went with Scizor first, thinking it would be more likely to get picked before Florges. And then, on the wheel, Sylveon got taken the pick before me, and I took Florges, and then Poppin was sad because he was going to take Florges and then couldn't, and he was 2 picks later. So turns out I was right to take it when I did, because I definitely couldn't have got it later. But we're talking about Scizor right now. Steel typing is great. It only has the one weakness. It is a 4x weakness in flying, or in fire, but both of my previous picks resist fire. Said it wrong twice. And, Scizor is good, right? It Terra Steel Bullet Punch. It has close combat now, so it can Terra Fighting. Most of the broken dark types are in the other division, but there's some kicking around. There's some, most drafts have a steel type that you want to hit hard and stuff like that, so Scizor can be a Pokemon that does that. Also, as has been pointed out to me, and was definitely not the plan or particularly on purpose, it is a third Tailwind setter in a row. Scizor is a much more like bulky, set it up, take advantage on the next turn type of setter, but sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you're going to set Tailwind, and because your other Pokemon's going to die, and you're going to switch it in, and then bing bang boom. Now my Rotom Frost is going before everything, and it hits you with a giant Terra Electric Thunderbolt. But that's my third pick, Steel. Steel's great. Steel the Scizor, Steel type John Henry Irons. A cool dude. Next up, we've got Krakoa, the Living Island. X-Men is rad. Krakoa is cool. All the House of X stuff that's going on is totally rad. And Krakoa is a cool, important part of that. For those of you that don't know, Krakoa is an island, but it's also a living... it's like basically a person, but island. And also, Krakoa is a mutant. So Krakoa, because anything can be a mutant. And then if you're a mutant, you can live on Krakoa. But Florges is my fourth pick. We talked about how I got it just barely in time, which is nice. Florges has a absolutely bonkers special defense stat. It is 154, which is one of the highest on the draft board. It's resisting the fairy hits, or rather it's neutral to the fairy hits, but it's, most of the fairy hits are going to be special, and they're mostly going to be dazzling gleams from from Terra fairies or coverage types, because there's not a ton of fairies on the board in general. And so Florges can come in and protect my Roaring Moon and protect a couple of the later Pokemon that have less egregious fighting type or fairy type weaknesses, like my fighting type Quackleval. But also, it also does cool stuff, right? The reason I wanted Florges over Sylveon, which I basically could have gotten, or at least could have planned to get at this same point, even though it went one pick before me, was for Symbiosis. I've already got one Mon that definitely wants to often be using a consumable item, which leaves Etrigan here with no item. And Florges can then give it one. So a Life Orb or maybe a Fairy Resist Berry. Probably not that, because then Florges basically just has no item. But probably a Life Orb. But yeah, Florges is good. It does a couple things, like be very bulky, have the move Moonblast, be a fairy type, and have Symbiosis, which are 4 things I wanted. So welcome to the team, 4th member, Krakoa the Living Island. Moving on to another B-list villain. Well, I guess my first villain. Killer Frost, the Rotom Frost. Rotom forms are like great now. Just get a cheap one because you can Terra it away from its bad typing. And you still get stab boosts, but then it's just a regular electric type, or maybe you have a particular type that you want to be Terraing it into for a particular matchup, which is nice. But yeah, all the Rotoms are good now, except Baby Rotom I think is just fine, because like the 120 or whatever difference in stats, maybe it's 80, I don't remember, it's a lot. Like the stat difference on the defenses is pretty huge. And like 105 is pretty good special attack too, so it does some more good stuff for me. The first screen setter I picked up, well, kind of. Scissor gets light screen, but trick things. That's one of the things that Rotoms love to do. Trick a Scarf onto something slow, or put it on a support Pokemon or something like that. It can Will-O-Wisp if I need it to. I've got another Will-O-Wisp user in Talonflame, but like I said, it's nice to take the pressure off of any one Mon always or often having to do a specific thing by having some redundancy across your team. Yeah, Rotom Frost is good. Killer Frost is cool. Love my lesser known comic book heroes and villains. Speaking of, now moving on to one of the least known of the ones I've got on this list. Triton, one of the Inhumans. He's a royal son of. He's like the son of Blackagar Boltagon, Black Bolt, the king of the Inhumans. He's like a prince or something like that. He's a fish man, and Quillfish, my 6th pick, is a fish. So they're both spiky. They're both mean little weirdos. So Quillfish is Triton the Inhuman. When I picked Quillfish, my goal was like, I want to go into the middle and lower sections of the draft board before most other people start picking it apart, because there's not a lot of great stuff there, and I want to get what's good and what goes with my team first. Yeah, makes sense. So I got Quillfish. It helped my type chart out some by what was at that point. I had 2 fire weaknesses, so I wanted to get a fire resist. And I had 2 fighting resists, or fighting weaknesses, so I wanted to get a fighting resist. Water and poison does that nicely. It also has Intimidate, which is pretty good, because my physical defenses at that point weren't great. 71 on Talonflame and Roaring Moon. Rotom obviously won a 7 in both. And Florges is 68. So like my physical defenses aren't that strong, so the Intimidate is pretty sweet. The typing is nice, and I never really ended up picking up like a great Rain Dancer to maybe have a little bit of a cheeky Swift Swim mode, but I don't know, maybe, I think Impidimp gets Rain Dance. Maybe Impidimp will set it. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'll look and see if I'm wrong. Rain Dance. Oh no, I have like a million Pokemon that gets it. Oh, even Talonflame gets Rain Dance. Okay, yeah, everybody gets Rain Dance. But Impidimp is not one of them, so I was right about that. So maybe we'll have a cheeky little rain mode, fast mode kind of thing going on with Qwilfish. But I think most of the time it's going to be intimidating and just trying to be as bulky as it can. No Eviolite, unfortunately, but that's okay. It does a couple things, and it does those things serviceably, particularly for where I wanted to be spending my points in these kind of middle rounds, right? I wanted to be mostly in the 6 to 10 region, trying to recover some of the like huge spends I did early on, particularly with Roaring Moon being 21 points. Next up, we had this little weirdo over here, Mr. Mixie's Pitlick, which is a name I have no trouble saying. I've known how to say it for years. Mixie's Pitlick, Mixie's Pitlick, Mixie's Pitlick. Mix, yes, Pit, lick. Thanks, Superman the Animated Series, for teaching me how to say that one. Impidimp is a little weirdo, just like the fifth dimensional imp, Mr. Mixie's Pitlick. So, what better combination of Pokemon weirdo and comic book weirdo? One does not exist. It's 5 points, and it's a bunch of good moves on Prankster, right? It's screens, it's fake out, it's parting shot. It's not Encore. That would be great, but it's not. It does what it does, and I'm happy with it. Prankster Taunt is nice. Prankster Taunt on a Dark type means I'm not getting counter taunted by other pranksters. So, yeah, and I mean, people know what Impidimp does, right? It's going to run a Sash mostly. It's going to be Prankster mostly. It's going to run, the appropriate utility moves, often a screen, maybe both screens. Maybe it holds Light Clay, but maybe it doesn't, because Light Clay, I'm actually not a huge fan. Okay, let's talk about Light Clay for a second, since I thought about it. I'm not a huge fan of the move, of the item Light Clay, because it's essentially no item unless the game goes for a 6th turn, right? So until the 6th turn after, like it's like an item that pays you back later for making the game go very long. Which screens kind of, screens can help the game go longer. But overall, I think Light Clay is not as worth it as other items because screens already lasts a pretty long time anyway. So that's that's just my thought on Light Clay. I think it's a little overrated as an item. It's fine, but not great. And Impidimp is pretty fine. And a little weirdo, Mr. Mixie's Pitlick, 5th dimensional imp, the Impidimp. Next up, we've got Mr. Steal Yo Girl himself, Namor the Submariner, King of Atlantis, an absolute simp for Sue Storm. And honestly, he's right. And Sue Storm should be with Namor. Reed Richards sucks, and Namor rules. So there you go. Quackleval. So after spending a couple points or a couple rounds on some low point Pokemon, kind of dipping into those middle to low tiers earlier than a lot of other coaches were, I had some points to spend. So in round 8, I go with Quackleval. It gives me a fighting type. That means I don't have it takes some pressure off of Scissor, having to be a close combat Terra fighting Pokemon sometimes. It gives me some priority in Aqua Jet. It gives me some scaling with Moxie and Aqua Step. Quackleval's a good Pokemon. And that's kind of the theme of this whole draft is I really only pick Pokemon that I thought are good. And that I can get use out of, right? It's got kind of a lot of weaknesses, right? Because fairy or fighting and water don't overlap super well in terms of covering for each other on a single Pokemon. But, I had no other grass weaknesses in the whole draft. So that's not that big of a deal. I don't expect people are going to pick grass moves at all, really, against me. Like sleep powder or whatever, or spore if I go up against that. But like offensive grass, like that's not where you're getting this team with in terms of offense. So I'm not too worried about that. Electric, maybe a little more. Like I do have a ground type coming up. Roaring Moon resists it. Rodent Frost resists it. But the fairy types I've got kind of covered with my Intimidate Quillfish for physical fairies and my Florgus for special fairies. Also, Scissors a steel type and resists them anyway. So the weaknesses are mostly covered, and Quackball brought more power to the team, right? My team offensively is pretty physically oriented overall. And that is what it is. Like Pokemon is more physically oriented generally. When you can only use one of each Pokemon on a draft board, then there are just more Pokemon that are physically oriented than specially oriented. So we went with some other stuff I was thinking of. I was thinking of Tauros Aqua in this spot as well. But I already had an Intimidator, and Quackball let me have a better theme. I was kind of thinking about these a little bit as we were going on. I was like, oh, Impidimp is Mixer makes this pit. Definitely. Quackball, even instantly, I was like, oh, he's Namor, of course, because he's he's like a funky little saucy dancer boy, and Namor is like a Mr. Steal Your Girl. So Quackball is Quackball's on the team. Quackball's great. I like Quackball. Does good stuff, and Namor is cool. Next up, we have Secret, the Ghastly. Secret's from Young Justice. She's like a ghost spirit kind of superhero. She you see she turns into like Misty kind of. Woo, she's a ghost. And obviously she fights and stuff. Secret's fine, but Secret the Ghastly is pretty good. At one point, so at this point I had 16 points left. And I knew I wanted to spend 16 of it on my Toad Scroll, the next pick, my 10th pick. Looking at everybody else's draft boards, there were, I think, 2 other teams that still had enough points to take, that had at least 15 points, right? So they could do 13 plus 1 plus 1, and could conceivably take Toad Scroll. Of those 2 or 3, I think one of them maybe wanted it, but I did not think I would get Ghastly back. And I wanted Ghastly. It was pointed out to me by Electric, thank you Electric, that Ghastly is pretty good. It's got 100 special attack, which is crazy for 1 point. At 80 speed, it's reasonably fast. It can take advantage of all the tailwind I've got. It's got some high base power moves, right? Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb are good. It's got Dazzling Gleam, which is also fine. It's not as great if you're not a fairy type using it, but it's still pretty fine. And it can, it takes a little bit of the Trick Room pressure off of Toad Scroll if I need to do that. It can maybe Icy Wind, probably not though. It can throw out some Will-O-Wisps. It could set Rain Dance maybe, run a Toxic, something like that. I don't know. But for 1 point, get Ghastly in your next draft. Next up, we've got my 10th pick, Swamp Thing, the Toad Scroll. Swamp Thing rules. Grant Morrison's Swamp Thing run is pretty great. Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is pretty great. Read those books. Toad Scroll is also great. I think it's underappreciated. It's people know it's good, but I think it's better than people think it is. Not necessarily in terms of tiering. I think 13 is a pretty reasonable point total for it, but like for a 13-point mon, you're getting the kind of stuff that you want out of 13 points. You're getting a few specific things that it does very well, and generally useful stats and secondary stuff. Mycelium Might is pretty annoying, right? Like it doesn't. Its ability to like Rage Powder is slightly reduced because like you're not pulling in those +2 priority moves because they're going first. Spore always going last is kind of annoying because like you get taunted or killed or whatever. 4x weakness to ice is another. We've got a number of 4x weaknesses on the team, right? Rock, fairy, ice, fire, and then 2 4x weaknesses down here, but that's Carcoal and that's not as big of a deal. But yeah, Toadskrull does a few things really well, and it takes some of the pressure off of Roaring Moon to be a ground type, because sometimes it wants to be a flank type, or sometimes it wants to be a steel type, or a fire type, or I don't know. It's Roaring Moon's great. It can be like anything. But yeah, I mean, this gives me the option of just like having a ground type. Ground types are good. And yeah, that late in the draft, basically nobody else could take it. So it's pretty sweet to have just kind of sitting in my pocket, ready to go. That I could just kind of wait as long as I wanted to until it was time to pull the trigger. Last up, we've got Red Volcano, the Carcoal. Red Volcano is so there's Red Tornado, which is like one that people actually know. Sometimes it's created by Dr. Ivo, Professor Ivo, I don't remember. Is an android. He made these for robots based on elements. Red Tornado, Red Volcano, Red Tsunami, and Red the Fire one. Because Red Volcano is the Earth one. But anyway, I don't remember. Doesn't matter. Carcoal is 1 point. It is a rock type, which I didn't have yet. It'll come maybe once or twice. It's pretty decently bulky with EV Light. 80, 90, 70 becomes very respectable. It has Flash Fire, which is pretty awesome. I'll probably run that more than any like steam engine nonsense. Maybe if I go up against Mousehold, it'll have Flame Body. But yeah, it was a 1-pointer that had a couple of positives that I thought was better than a lot of the 1-pointers and any of the 2-pointers actually. So as I mentioned, I have a point left over. I've only spent 114, so that's something for me to keep in mind later in the season. But overall, this is the B team. So named because Etrigan and Namor are like slightly less well known, and those were the first two that I came up with good names for. Mr. Mixie Pitlick. So then I got to find good secondary and B list heroes and villains for the other ones. So we went with these 11. This is the B team: Hawkman, Etrigan, Steel, Krakoa, Killer Frost, Triton, Mr. Mixie's Pitlick, Namor, Swamp Thing, Secret, and Red Volcano. Get excited, because I am. Let's talk a little bit about the team overall. I mentioned my weaknesses. I've got a number of 4x weaknesses here that are mostly covered by the other mods. I didn't do like anything as nice as this grass is, but for one that I have 4 times weakness on, right? So like I've got 2 other fire weaknesses. I've got 1 other ice weakness. I've got a couple other rock weaknesses, although it's not actually as bad as it, because like Carcoal is most of the time not super relevant. Red Volcano will come when it's good. We'll see when it's good. My fairy 4x, like Impidimp dies to everything anyway, and then we've got the Quackleval, which maybe it tears away from its fighting type, maybe it doesn't, but Yeah, so that's something that I'm going to have to keep an eye on in team building, is covering my 4Xs. My speed delta is not as great as it maybe could have been. I'm a pretty fast team generally, and I've got, the 3 tailwind setters at the top. So I'm not necessarily going to want to be playing in Trick Room very often, but I do have reasonable Pokemon that can reverse or set Trick Room if I decide I actually do want to run Trick Room. I mean, Iron Ball exists, the power items exist. It's not inconceivable that I could run a Trick Room team. I got a pretty decent selection of support moves here. Like I mentioned, I got the 2 Trick Room setters, 3 Tailwinds, some Icy Wind, a little bit of Thunder Wave. Not as much as I would have liked, but like Impidimp, it's Prankster, that's nice. A million Taunters. Quackaball is my only Encore user, which is a little sad. I do like that move. 2 Feint users that could very reasonably use Feint. Like Feint, Terra Normal, Feint, Technician, Scizor is it build your own extreme speed? No, but it's not that far off. And most of the time, if I'm going to do that, I would just want to Terra Steel Bullet Punch anyway. But I got a little bit of Fake Out. Got plenty of screen setters. Like lots of my support stuff is doubled up in a couple different mons. So like any individual one, I can kind of take the pressure off. Has kind of been the thought process for the team overall. And yeah, that's it. That's the squad, the B team. Season 9, I got Steve coming up week 1, and I gotta do some prepping because I like his team too. And also I'm moving soon, so gotta figure out when I'm gonna have some time to do some prepping and some battles. But that's the team. Watch out for them. Peace.